And we're live. That was, we just spent a wonderful hour with a gentleman who has a real depth in the political and social work realm. Is that the right word?
He's a public servant who spent a
Thank
lot of time, in addition to his normal job, actively engaging in the political machinations of how things go. Someone who has boots on the ground knowledge, who understands the way things work as opposed to the way we want them to work.
Right.
An elder statesman in that sense, and an elder. And honestly, we should listen more to our elders. This is an opportunity for people to learn a lot about how to manage their frustrations in the face of political battles and political struggles, and how their municipalities work. But also, it's a lesson in humor. And one of the great things is we have a very serious subject, but there's a kind of grace and humor that goes with it. And that was, I'm sure, hard won in his career. Really a great conversation, and you should stick through it, because at the end we get into the more intense aspects of the issues that are particular to our community. And as a teaser, it involves the high school where Tupac Shakur went to high school. So you'll want to stick around and hear our conversation about that. Greg?
Subscribe, send us a note, share it with your friends, support Compton Cowboys and Blast, drink Adrenochrome Cola, and live elitely.
Sis, hallo?
Leven.
Bestuur zeker wegen dem.
Jag är inte nicio.
Sitaki ubenza, anika sirikie.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
And we're live with another episode of the Moped Outlaws. Today, our guest is Mr. Dick Spotswood. We're so happy to have you, Dick. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Before we get started, when we were in the preparatory part of the call, before we started recording, you started to talk a little bit about your history and what you've been up to. Could you kind of give us a little bit of perspective on the kind of work that you've done and the way that you've served?
Well, I have been involved in politics since high school, and as a volunteer, sometimes as a staff member. In law school, I was a lawyer for 45 years. I interned in the State Senator George Moscone's office in Sacramento. I knew George well from San Francisco. I volunteered in his campaigns. He was the kind of guy that after you were volunteering, he'd put you in the car. There'd be a driver, and you'd be in the back seat with 2 or 3 volunteers. He'd take you out to dinner and spend time. That led to being on the Democratic Central Committee for San Francisco. I was secretary of the Conference of Democratic Clubs, president of the Democratic Club, and moved to Marin County. And long ago, when I was much younger, I was elected to the Mill Valley City Council, where I served 3 terms, and 3 terms as mayor. And was representative of the cities of Marin, 11 cities, as their appointee to the Golden Gate Bridge Board, a regional agency. After I left that, retired from active politics, I went on Channel 22, KRCB, public broadcasting for the North Bay, and did a show, and was there a long time, for a quarter century, 25 years, their election night host and commentator. I've been with the Marin Independent Journal for about 25 years. I'm twice weekly in the paper on Wednesdays and Sundays, and I write about government and politics. And I have an occasional blog, which I call the Militant Centrist.
Got it. That's a lot of work. Well, let's start with saying thank you for your service. Like we often do that with military veterans, but we don't do that enough with civil servants, civic servants, or public servants, as they're often mentioned. So what did you love most about working with the Honorable Mr. Moscone?
First of all, he was a great guy and good fun, and would tell great stories. But like a lot of the other people I worked for in San Francisco or volunteered for, it was a learning experience. And a couple of them said to me, you're learning the game now because you're making the rounds every night. And making the rounds means you're in the back of you're driving usually. For me, the great thing for a young person is to be the driver That's the person that keeps the schedule. And then and when you go to events, all the political people are in the back and you're all chatting and you get to know them. And you exchange, you trade information. You trade information. What's the next event? How is that going to go? Who's there? And so you learn the basics of retail politics. That's quite different from governing, but you need to know people. The essential trait is the ability to work broadly with people. And you learn that the hard way. Trial and error. And if you stay that long enough, you might be pretty good at it.
Was there cancel culture back then, or has cancel culture really something that's just recently occurred?
Cancel culture. Well, it depends how you define it. In San Francisco in those days was a very different place, very ethnic. Everybody was identified on their background. Despite my name, I'm Italian American, raised in a San Francisco Italian household. My grandfather was definitionally Italian. He was what they call themselves scavenger. You'd call him a garbage man on the trucks. But they were all from the same part of Italy. But everybody had it. The Greeks had it. The Jews had it. The Chinese had it. The Chileans had it. Everybody would identify, and they all became kind of allies. The goal was to get the other guy's support, not to push them away, but to bring them in. I kept a yarmulke in my car. I went to synagogue so often with candidates who were Jewish. I'm not Jewish. So that was a different era. There were Republicans in San Francisco. I know that's hard to believe, but they were viable, and they were, where I was coming from, the threat. I was actually employed by the Democratic Central Committee to run the voter registration drive, and we had a great chairman. And he says, I don't worry about conservative Republicans. And those we call today moderate Republicans. I worry about liberal Republicans. They're our biggest threat, meaning biggest threat to Democrats. So you learn. That's how you meet people, know people, understand how it all works. And then you can make it work if you have any ability to replicate what you learned.
But in those days, a good PR person could keep something out of the papers. Nowadays, you can't do that anymore.
There was a current reporter, writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, who was in his earlier years, a PR person, and he says, my whole job was to keep the institution out of the papers. Mm-hmm. And
So would you say that was a benefit to our political process or a hindrance?
Well, we were always looking for stuff. You know, can I tell you a funny story, which is typical of the time? I was the editor of a Democratic Club newsletter, and there was a guy who you may know named Bill Bagley. Mm-hmm. He is from Marin County. At the time, he was a federal appointee to the Commodities Future Trading Exchange. I found out that his real born last name was Baglietto, not Bagley. And I wrote in the newsletter, because we were a Democratic newsletter and he was a Republican, why would a person hide such a good name like that? And are they ashamed of it? That's what I wrote. The next thing I know, I get in the mail, I have it here at my desk somewhere, a letter on the personal stationery of the chairman of the Commodities Future Trading Exchange. I open it up, and it's a black glove. Mm. You know what that means?
Mm-hmm.
He's challenging you to a duel.
Well, it's a mafia thing too. The black hand.
Oh wow!
And it's you're marked. Now, let me just say, it was very funny, and I've actually kept it to the extent that I became very friendly with Bagley. I even introduced him one time at an event, and I said, I want to tell this story. And I had the glove with me. And it turned out Bagley was always a great humorist and great fun. And I'm not sure that happens today.
So was that a humorous gesture on his
Yes,
part?
yes.
Okay.
He was just being, because he was Italian. And right. I think I mentioned that I was too. So it was very funny.
Well,
and laughter ever since. Well, I joined a lunch club, which he was one of the founders. Political lunch club.
Your area of expertise with your column is politics. So
yes, and transportation.
Okay.
I like to pick transport. It's government. I say I'm not just the politics columnist. I'm the politics and government columnist.
All right. So what I've heard often from people with real depth of experience in this realm is that it used to be that Democrat and Republican were still working together. There was a common goal, and it wasn't so much a war that if a policy came up on the Republican side, it was automatically going to be vilified by Democrats. And that seems to be the temperature of politics today. Do you find that to be real?
Oh, yeah, sure. This is going to sound absurd, but when I was at the University of San Francisco, I was the president of the Young Democrats. There was a Young Republican club. The officers of the two clubs cross-dated. After election night, they go to the Democratic Republican Party, and then we'd all get together and drink. And we became very close friends. I can tell you that most of those folks who are still alive are no longer Republicans. They are independents because that guy in Washington, Miami or wherever he's from.
Yeah.
Bagley, by the way, Bagley left the Republican Party before he died and became an independent for that reason.
So have you been a Democrat unequivocally your entire life?
No. When I left active politics and started doing television, which was political stuff, civic, I changed. First of all, I wanted to get the message across because people were saying, "Oh, you're using that to run for something else." That was not my desire. I was retired from active politics at a fairly young age. But I wanted to make that message crystal clear, so I changed my registration, which it is today, to what we call no party preference today. I'm not an independent, whatever you want. I'm not registered as a Democrat.
Got it.
And I want to use that mainly to get the message across. I'm not running again, folks.
Yeah, so I have been a registered Democrat since I was old enough to vote. And after last year's election, I chose to become an independent. But recently, I have decided to become a member of the America Party, which is which has just started. And my theory is that that's the bridge point. How do you feel about that? And what have you thought about the America Party?
Well, let me step back a tad bit to paraphrase this. Not the right word. A few years ago, a fellow who's pretty well known in San Francisco and San Mateo County by the name of Quentin Kopp, former supervisor, state senator as an independent, and a Superior Court judge. But I knew Kopp well. I drove him in earlier years. And so he calls me up. He says, "Spotswood, I read your stuff. You'll be interested in this. I'm going down to the Stanford Faculty Club. They're going to talk about setting up a new party. I'll drive. You come with me." And I went to the first meeting of the Common Sense Party. And loaded with people I knew. I can mention Dan Schnur, who is a well-known Republican consultant, though today would not be considered he's a liberal Republican, the old school. He's a professor at USC, I think. And so I followed that closely. I knew some people that changed to Common Sense Party. They wanted to take a middle ground. Basically, they wanted to be fiscally conservative and socially liberal, the old combination. The bottom line is they didn't get anywhere. They had some very fine, well-connected people, supposedly some Silicon Valley money, but it didn't go anywhere. I'm all for third parties. I'd love to see a multi-party system. Every time I read about it, and we read about the American Party, I said, okay, I don't have any philosophical problem. I go back to the practical problems that so many Americans are welded to the concept of only two parties. And we have a system, a political system, that facilitates that division and discourages the formation of third parties. If you go to Canada, you'll see that the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is the left, has a solid basis. There was a Reform Party there. The progressives, I think, the conservatives, again, are calling themselves progressive conservatives, which kind of mean liberal Republicans. And you have the, not the socialists, what do they call it? The Liberal Party, Canadian Liberal Party. In New England, in Britain, multi-parties. Most democratic countries have multi-parties, and very few have chosen the U.S. new countries over the last 2 centuries. Very few have chosen the two-house model of the American system. The president and 2 houses, and single past the post voting. So I'm all for it. I'm just not optimistic that it's practical.
Understood. Thank you. What do you think about the cult of personality built around the America Party initiatory, Elon Musk? Do you think that's more of a practical hindrance, or is his wealth and his determination? He clearly impacted the 2024 election on behalf of President Trump. Yes. Do you think that he has enough momentum and resources and charisma to maybe be the guy that breaks the lock on the duopoly?
Well, I was I'm old enough to remember well Ross Perot.
Me too.
And
I voted for Ross.
Did not have the financial. We had financial resources, but not to the extent that Elon Musk has. So Musk's great strength is his fiscal resources. He needs, in my opinion, if it's a sole cult of personality, it's a negative. You have to have a group, wide group of people that can be identified with it. And you need to have I remember years ago, the Republicans, this is 30 when Nixon was running, they had a poster with all the Republicans on it. Ed Brooke from Massachusetts, John Lindsay from New York, a whole ideological cross-section, a big tent. And so the American Party, to have a shot, has to be a big tent, and it can't just be a cult of personality. It can't be a cult of personality. That doesn't mean that it could do without much money. And if you can put all that together, you've got a stronger basis than one guy with a lot of dough.
In my experience, the Rainbow Coalition was a strong contender as a third party. Do you think that the fact that Reverend Jackson was the sole cult of personality was one of its Achilles heels?
Well, I don't think in my opinion, he wasn't of the cult of personality ilk. I mean, I give that as a compliment to him. I just don't think he regarded, we all have to have an ego to do any of this stuff. But let's say, unlike Trump, his ego was more under control. So I don't lump Reverend Jesse Jackson into the cult of personality deal.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
In regards to this idea of cult of personalities and this idea of a bifurcated duopoly that rallies around a personality, one of the things that Jordan Peterson has called out in his work is this idea of identity politics. Are you familiar with that? And if so,
well, I'm not familiar with Peterson. I'm not familiar with Peterson. I'm certainly familiar with identity politics.
So what would break the American obsession with identifying with their political nature and bring us back towards this idea of a commons as being more valuable than our identity around what team we're on?
Well, I see what you're saying, because so many people, can I rephrase?
Yes, please.
I get it correctly. I think what you're saying is that so many people own identity is based on their political leanings.
Yes.
They see themselves as a Democrat or Republican before they see themselves as anything else.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yes. And
Yeah,
how do
good.
we
Okay.
get us back to a more unified field, if you will?
Part of that is due to the breakdown of the old identities we had. If you remember when I was talking about my days in San Francisco politics, it was ethnically oriented. The ethnic views were quite positive because everybody wanted to get the other guy's support. And so you looked at it as a positive rather than a negative. You didn't say, well, I'm Jewish. I'm not going to deal with those Irish Catholics. They didn't say that. The Jewish guys would say, there was a group in San Francisco, it still may exist, called the III. Have you guys ever heard of the III?
No.
No.
It stands for Irish, Israeli, Italian.
Mm.
And the three chairmen, George Riley, member of the Board of Equalization, they met in a big ballrooms. Place was filled with politicians. Charlie Barca, who was a police captain, and Nate Cohen, who was a big-time lawyer. And they always laughed and say, isn't it amazing that the Jews and the Irishmen and the Italians can all get along together? And I always thought to myself, that's all nonsense. Of course they get along together. They were raised next door to each other. They were business partners. They intermarried. They loaned each other money. Of course they got along and supported each other. That was a different identity. It was a positive identity. Now that's gone away. I mean, I asked our city manager, who has an Italian name, what part of Italy are you from? Are your relatives? He said, I really don't know. To me, that's preposterous. But that's the next generation. So those old identities, ethnicity, religion, maybe your hometown, have kind of diminished in significance, diminished in significance. And the void has been replaced by people identifying with one of the two political parties. And it's not healthy. And the $64 question is, how do you break it up? How do you get us to start thinking on a more broader, big tent approach? God knows, I don't.
Got it.
I apologize for my ignorance, but wasn't Mayor Moscone also at the time of Harvey Milk, correct?
Indeed he was.
Okay.
Here's a story. One day I'm at Notre Dame de Victoire Church Fathers Club or something. But there are lots of candidates. Politicians are in the back. And I'm standing I'm driving Supervisor Quentin Kopp. And I say to the guy in front of me, who's that guy? I don't stand right 4 feet from me. I said, whisper to Quentin, who's that guy? I don't recognize him. And Kopp, in his typical fashion, says, ha, 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 Harvey, Spotswood doesn't recognize you without the ponytail. That's when Harvey cut off the ponytail. And I didn't know him well, but I met Harvey many times. And he was he was well liked at the Board of Supervisors. He was a big card player. And he played with the aides, the supervisorial aides. And Harvey owned a camera shop in the Castro. I think it's on Market Street. And that was just at the time the gay community was rising and becoming a factor. Matter of fact, to the extent that there were multiple factors in the gay community, Harvey was one of them. There's a guy named Rick Stokes, led another. I was very close to a guy named Jim Foster, who was not in Harvey's camp, was in Stokes' camp. There was, it was who was going to be the king of the gay community, and Harvey ultimately became. But those were, yeah.
Well, in your experience, was Moscone truly interested in the rights and equity of the homosexual community, or was it a political gesture?
Well, everything's political.
To a degree.
As they said, the producer, it's showbiz. Personally, sure. George was a he wasn't a judgmental person. And the fact that two guys were together, two women were together, or whatever, yeah, okay. That just it wasn't. That's fine. Let's just. He was more of the mind your own business persuasion. That it's not government's job to get involved in a person's sexuality. And I think that applied to other areas too. I mean, it's if you had to have a worldview that was open, and he certainly was in that. But I have to say, when the AIDS movement started to rise, there wasn't much dispute in the San Francisco political community, the straight community. Yeah, okay, welcome aboard.
Well, here's what I'm wondering, because you are correct in the fact that everything's politics, and one of the elements that is so easily recognized is homosexuals were saying a married couple has elements of their life that are supported because they're married, such as insurance, taxes, etc. We would like those as well. And I think it's a great example of a system that, whether conscious or unconscious, has sort of steamrolled a group of people, and the people are now vying for equity. And that's what I'm wondering is, in your experience back in those times, were people such as Mayor Moscone and other board members, etc., recognizing the need for the system to bolster the equity of these people who had been steamrolled?
No. How's that for a straightforward answer?
That's a very simple, straight answer.
The answer, and I'll explain, the pendulum started to swing then, moving toward equity. But, in 1975, 65, 75, 80, I wasn't in San Francisco in 85, but the idea of same-sex marriage was radical. And so you could have been a person very sympathetic to the gay community, but not for same-sex marriage. Now, that seems, if somebody's born today, but a young adult today, that seems, huh? I mean, we just accept same-sex marriage as that's the way it is. I'm at least around here. The pendulum had not swung that far at that point.
I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit, but it's in a similar vein. I was a young boy when the Bay Area rapid transit system was built.
Yes.
And one of the things that has become clear about the Bay Area rapid transit system was that it is not available in Marin County.
Yes.
And some of the historic discussions of that imply that the culture of Marin County was exclusionary towards people of color and other poor populations. And that one of the reasons that the BART train doesn't come here is to protect that class of people from crime and the problems that go with that particular cultural frame of reference. Can you corroborate that that's how the decision was made?
No, because I've written and have done a lot of research on this. I've written a paper. I gave a lecture and mentioned this in my column. Matter of fact, the lecture was given at July 8th, 2024, 7 p.m. at the Mill Valley Public Library, entitled Why BART Never Came to Marin. Look at how the old commute to the city evolved. You'll learn the myth that the NIMBY Marinites, fearing growth, nixed the deal in a modern day fabrication to fit with current thinking. That's not history. In fact, the Marin was thrown out of BART. And I've got all the data. I got pictures. I went back.
The Marin was thrown out of BART?
Yes.
Why? What was the reason?
that cost too much money to build a bridge, build a tunnel. They came down to the idea was going to be a tunnel from North Beach to Sausalito. And Marin County didn't have the population to boost it. Marin supervisors wanted to stay. Those were days when growth was not what it is today.
Yeah.
The Marin Independent Journal strongly supported BART to Marin. Supervisors did. I think, what's one of the lines here? I've got all the details. I mean, it's literally, the result was that BART, including the originally planned 5 counties, were within the rapid transit district. There wasn't sufficient tax base to support a 4-county district, including Marin. Out went Marin from BART over objections from Marin's Board of Supervisors, the business community, the IJ, and most Marinites. I'll go back to the original data. I got carried away. I can show you drawings of the plans.
Are those in the article?
Well, it was a lecture. I did not. Those weren't in the article because they didn't have pictures available for pictures. But I've been figuring that I'm going to get invited to give this talk again at some point in time, and now I got to do a PowerPoint. So I went up to the room, the California room at the Marin Library, with great assistance from the librarians. Let me just give credit where credit is due, to finding old original newspapers from 1960s, the 60s. The files, they all had pictures, proposed train on the bridge. The diagrams have where the station would be. It didn't get to Novato because Novato wasn't big enough in those days. We'd get to the Civic Center, but someday they thought they could get to Novato. Peter Bear says, we were forced out. I mean, there's quotes all over the place. I mean, it's a myth. They were forced out because we don't really understand today how a small, formerly cow county was transitioning into boosterism, marvelous Marin Breakfast Club. The growth wasn't the enemy then. They wanted BART to Marin because everybody was commuting to San Francisco, unlike today.
But they couldn't pull it off.
No, they were thrown out, public votes, big stories in the papers. It's all there.
Got it. I want to expand the range of our.
By the way, it's fun research.
I'll bet. It sounds fascinating. I'd love to see the presentation. Keep us posted. Next question. I personally have the opinion that the abdication or relinquishing of public transit right-of-ways to the fast track authority is a crime against the previous taxpayers. And that the idea that there are toll roads that were built by California taxpayers 50 years ago that are now becoming, or the free roads that are now becoming toll roads, and that all of the bridges are outside of the local municipality's jurisdiction around fare handling and that sort of thing, to this bureaucracy that can just charge me whatever it wants when it wants to take money out of my account, as opposed to me handing it $5 or $8 or $10 at the time of use. What happened that we lost the control over that? And do you agree with my premise that this is a mistake and that's a slight against autonomy and local municipal rule?
Well, it's a very good topic, but it requires a little history. Some history seems trivial, but they often teaches lessons. I recently had to go to Vallejo to have lunch with a friend of mine. And every time I drive across that 2-lane road, I think of myself, I think about the history, what could be, what should be, where it's going. That road was built as a toll road, a private toll road in the 30s, I guess.
We're talking about Highway 37.
Is it 12 or 30? Whatever goes to Vallejo. I guess it's 37. Yeah. It was built as a toll road. Bagley told me one time you used to be able to see where the toll building was, but it was private. It was a private toll road. Heck, the road to Mount Tamalpais, the top of Mount Tamalpais, was a toll road. Mm. It put the Mountain Railroad out of business. In fact, I'm a Rotarian, and one of the founders of the Rotary Club worked for the toll road. State took it over to the state park, then there's no more toll road. So just interesting history. Toll roads tend to be, well, fortunately, we don't have many in Northern California or Central California. They've been tried in Southern California. They're kind of a last gasp when there's no other funding source. And today, the reality of toll collection is quite different than it was 20 years ago because of fast track. A fast track is simply the fast track is a Metropolitan Transportation Commission vehicle. It in itself doesn't control anything. It's simply a cash register, mechanical. The amounts set aren't by some fast track guy. They're set on the Golden Gate Bridge, for instance, by a board of directors composed of directors from the 6 counties: San Francisco, Marin, Sonoma, Mendocino, Napa, and Del Norte, not Humboldt. I voted many times on toll increases, for or against. Usually the Marin County directors voted no. Bay bridges are all controlled by the Bay Toll Authority, Bay Bridge Toll Authority, which is a division of the Metropolitan Transportation District. It's the empire on the Bay. There's something called the Empire on the Hudson, which is the New York Port Authority. And there's a book called Empire on the Hudson. But this is the Empire on the Bay. They're the ones that control it. I do not believe they're very responsive to localities. They also control the money to transit agencies. And quite often, for instance, in the Golden Gate Bridge, the toll money is why there's a bus and ferry system, period. It couldn't exist without the toll money. Anyway.
Are they adequately caring for the Golden Gate Bridge? It looks like they don't paint enough.
They have a regular paint schedule, I assure you. But I was a longtime bus commuter on the number 4 to my office in the city law office.
Yep, I rode the number 4.
I was, at the time, there's 19 directors. I was the only commuter. But that was then, this is now.
So is the Golden Gate Bridge being properly cared for? It seems like it's decaying.
No, it is. It's in great shape. I follow it. I know I've stayed in touch with them. I don't really have any complaints. Their numbers are, as you probably know, the numbers on all modes are down. The crossings by bus, ferry, and auto are down from where they were pre-pandemic. And that impacts their revenue. And that revenue impacts their ability to provide transit. In my mind, we ought to have a Bay Area, well, at the minimum, a North Bay Transit Authority, perhaps under the aegis of the Bridge District, so we get the toll money, but in some other form. But I'm not a great believer in all these separate, smaller agencies, which are really fiefdoms. And they exist because the directors love being on them, and the staff does a good job. So we ought to be combining some of these things and making it more efficient. We'd have more money for transit if for mobility. The proper term, the generic term is mobility. All modes, in other words. But some of us can advocate that, if I have done, to no effect.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving the conversation, Greg. I know you haven't been getting a lot of questions in, but I think you're going to like this one. As someone, Dick, who's served on boards, who's served in the capacity where you're responsible to a constituency, you're often faced with public comment periods and other moments of hearings where people it's designed to give people a voice. I have a little bit of experience with this. I was on an HOA board. That's minor compared to what you think. But there's this element of how aggrieved or threatened public people approach their relationships with boards that feels antagonistic and hypercritical. Those people feel powerless at the root of that anger and frustration that they're expressing. What are they missing about how to be more effective in getting what they need, as opposed to being vitriolic and angry in the board sessions? And how are boards conversely inured to the public because they're just exhausted?
Well, let's start by saying that public open time is a good thing. It's mandated now, and it should be. Everybody had an opportunity to be able to speak. It helps to be polite. And what I find, and I just had a conversation about this with a city councilman, Marin city councilman, is that every town seems to have a different culture, like a corporate culture. If you know what businesses have, PG&E has a corporate culture. Gelati Brothers Construction Company has a corporate culture. Larkspur and Corona Madera, supposedly the Twin Cities, the unidentical Twin Cities, have a different civic culture. I mean, just right next to each other. And we were talking about in Mill Valley why the city government culture among the community is different from the Mill Valley school board's culture. I mean, it's the same people. How come those institutions have different cultures? When I was mayor on open time, one of the things we tried to emphasize was, first of all, speak your mind, please. Be polite. But we have a well-educated middle to upper middle class community which understands and accepts that as a value that should be emulated, and that people who are out of control and say stupid things are looked at as not good citizens. And so that attitude works to make people behave. Yeah, I had a guy one time said to me, there was somebody on zoning, and he's in the audience, speaking. And he says, "What you're doing is un-American." Well, what he meant is we were trying to control what the development was going to be. But nobody is persuaded by insults. One of the things you learn, experience teaches, and certainly 45 years in the law teaches, where you're arguing to persuade. You're not arguing to... I saw guys in South San Francisco Superior Court, San Mateo, in the South City. He started to insult the judge. I'm sitting next to my law partner. Well, this guy is off the wall. He's screwing his client. Because the judge is going to say, a little more? Yeah, oh, keep it up. Keep it up. You finished? Yeah. Guilty. I mean, that's human nature. Don't do that. If you want to persuade by convincing people, being polite, respectful, but also doing your homework. And sometimes you see, and I've saw this a number of times, counsels say, they change. I mean, they're right there. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, okay,
So leading with verifiable data is the key. Actually being able to present an argument in the classical debate sense is the key.
Exactly. Your Honor, let me show you demonstrative evidence, which is something you can feel, handle. Juries love demonstrative evidence because they sit in the box. Oh, yeah. It's got to be admitted into evidence, got to be proper. But if once it's done, pictures being the ultimate demonstrative evidence. Or I one time had a guy in a slip and fall, and there was water on the floor at the supermarket, and he didn't see it. He went down, and I was doing arbitration, and I went out, spent $25 to buy one of those little bilingual signs on a, up and down like this that say, "Caution, peligro. There's water here. And,
I'm going to interrupt you because I want to get to this point.
Yeah.
There is ample evidence in the way that you mentioned the black glove. My father was a Supreme Court clerk in the state of Montana and witnessed that decisions were made in the judges' chambers out extrajudiciously. And Americans, particularly Americans who are in marginalized cultures, people who have suffered oppression, are of the opinion that a lot of these organizations are making deals without considering what's actually brought forth to them in the public forum with the proper weight, and that there's corruption, and that there's leverage, and that there's insider attitudes. So what do you say to someone who has that mindset about how they can be more effective in getting what they need from their constituents and their boards?
There's always a germ of truth, and the germ, but it's not exactly as you stated it, but it results in the same. It's not so much that people are whispering among themselves, or not whispering, but making deals among themselves. What happens more often is that the elected official comes into the room with a set of, what's the right word, beliefs, interests, convictions about an issue. Hasn't talked to anybody, but read the stuff, come up with conclusions, or just based on life experiences. So you have to turn that around. If you're the persuader, if you're the citizen, advocate, call them what you want. But that's a reality that people come in thinking, yeah, I think I understand that. And that's before they've heard any presentation. In the judicial system, one of the things to remember, and most lawyers know this, is entering the thing, the judge doesn't know nothing about the particular facts. You have an opportunity to give that person in writing your explanation. You're selling when you do that. And then when you make the oral arguments, you're reinforcing what the person's already read. And you're trying to undercut your opponent who's taking the opposite position. When we try to go to a city council, we as the advocate, need to persuade and convince people who basically think they're doing the right thing, even if you and I sit in the audience think, gee, that guy's a stupid guy. But how do we persuade? In the best situations, not always, in the best situations, the person is willing to listen. In the worst situations, they're not. They came in with a preconception's the word. They came in with a preconception, and by God, they're going to stick to it. Well, that's a crappy elected official. I mean, the answer is don't vote for him or her. We in the legal business, we used to say whether or not judges have judicial temperament was the strongest point. If you didn't have judicial temperament, it meant you were arrogant, basically. And you're never going to get anywhere with that way. I'll tell you a story about prejudice. I'm in Alameda County Superior Court. It's a divorce. And it's Smith versus Smith. Smith and Smith. We don't say versus anymore. Smith and Smith. The judge says, counsel, come to the bench, please. And yes, okay, because he's going to send us out. He says, I could, so-and-so, Judge so-and-so is next on the list. But do you guys have any problems with Judge so-and-so? Huh? What is that about? That's not happens very often. And we looked at each other. We never heard of Judge so-and-so before. And we said, well, no. Why do you ask? Oh, the judge says, some of the folks have a problem with him, but he's a very good guy. And you'll go down to his department. You've got the good say. Thanks very much. We go down to the department. We go in chambers. And the judge says, what's the issue? And we said, the issue is the value of this property in West Oakland. He says that's you're wrong on the value. That property's gone downhill. It's all blacks down there. My opponent and I were white, but both of our clients were black. Said to the judge, we're going to go in the hall and see if we can work this out a little bit first. And we go outside and said, shit, we can't go with this thing. This is a disaster. I mean, the blacks have moved in there, and you've got black clients? Holy moly. Well, the answer is reasonable minds prevailed, and we worked out a deal. It had nothing to do with that guy. But as far as I'm concerned, I told a lawyer, stick away from whatever his name was. It's been too many years to remember. So that does happen.
But we have no recourse in a city council situation because it's not two attorneys advocating to a third party.
It depends on the issue. If it's a zoning and thing like that, we used to always encourage people to go out in the hall and work it out. I mean, the lots can be resolved in land use matters, especially when it's neighbor versus neighbor. That happens a lot. The guy next door wants to put an extra bedroom, and the other guy says the window's going to look at my bedroom, and we can work this out. But otherwise, if it's a broad policy issue, you're correct.
Do you mind if I bring up the current district board situation that South Marin County has on its hands right now? Because I'm wondering, with your experience and advice, I'm very passionate about this issue. And part of my passion is listening to a 70-year-old woman 2 years ago talk about when she was a high schooler at Tamalpais High School, and the conversation happening today was happening 60 years ago. Why are we having the same conversation? And also on the district board's website, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Racial Equity Policy 415, but on their website, in their mission and vision, they recognize systemic racism exists, and they also say it's a non-negotiable responsibility to disrupt it. And I'm wondering what you would advise to me, who's very passionate and sometimes angry about the situation, to be an advocate in this realm of disruption.
Well, first of all, often things don't change. And let me give an example in Southern Marin County. Has a school district. Sausalito Marin City has a school district, which principally serves Marin City. Since the late 1960s, early 1970s, there have been suggestions in the community that the districts merge. They both feed the same high school. I personally support that. I've written that. I talked to then Superintendent of Education, Mary Jane Burke, about it. She told me, yes, it makes sense. It hasn't happened for a lot of reasons. First of all, Marin City's not excited about it. They want to very much keep a community, and they have a community in their school district. I would think that the time would come at some point in time that Marin City should be a municipality, their own city, village, town. Town and cities are the same thing. There's no difference. It's just preference to the name. I can't tell you I've read everything on the website, but I certainly accept what you say is accurate. I don't know. I'm going to be meeting in 2 weeks with the new superintendent. He was kind enough to reach out to suggestion of somebody else, but he did reach out, and so we're getting together. I don't know anything about him other than what I can find on the internet, which tells me he's professionally qualified. That's all I know. The district is, why is it that some agencies, Tamalpais Union High School District specifically, but not uniquely, always the source of news, commotion, whatever have you, and others are not? Why is, a municipal example is, why is Fairfax always in the news? I mean, in other towns, you laugh. And why San Rafael, far bigger, rarely comes into that situation? Different cultures in the town, different histories. But San Rafael, you would think, would be more of a contentious place than fairly tiny Fairfax. Why is the Tamalpais Union High School District often the source of contention? Ethnic studies, this contract situation which you're going through, have gone through. Some of it, I'll give you an example of poor leadership. And poor leadership can result in this. The Mill Valley School District had two proposals, both of which were, in my opinion, ill-conceived. The first was to build a middle school build a new middle school on the fields, the sports fields that the public had paid for, not basically paid for, by the community center. Nobody in town was happy with that. They held a meeting, and the mayor spoke, Urban Carmel, and at the 60-second point, they cut him off. That's it. He's representing the municipality. Two, they want to get rid of the promised transitional kindergarten program. TK is extremely beneficial. Everybody agrees. It's excellent. But they didn't have the money. The county superintendent of education, what's his name? John, anyway, comes. It's odd that the county superintendent would ever attend a school district meeting, but he speaks. And he's explaining why they need to do it. The law says they have to do it, and they have the money. But they cut him off at 60 seconds. He started speed talking, and they said, "You only got 20 seconds left." He started, blah, 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 I put the tape of that on the IJ website. So I write this critically. By the way, the middle school thing died. There was so much opposition. The TK thing, they came up with a compromise. So I get a call from the superintendent, Elizabeth Kaufman. "Let's have coffee." Sure. Well, it turns out she's a very nice person, educationally quite skilled, but I think has a tin ear for when it comes to public and outside the board comment. One of the duties of a superintendent and of the board is to be open to outside comment and perhaps sometimes change her mind. That was not a talent she had, and she did not mentor her Board of Education to strive for an openness, a transparency, a willingness to listen.
Greg, before you go, Greg, Greg asked you, how can he do better in that environment?
Oh, easy. Okay. Be polite. Have your evidence. Be brief. I'm not. Be brief. And have a good, think lawyerly. Think like a lawyer. You want to persuade. You're not making a statement to the audience. You're not even making a statement. You're persuading. And you need to know your audience. You need to know the jurors who are the board when you make that argument. What will persuade these 5 people?
Right.
You've got to ask yourself that question.
Well, one thing that Mark talked about when he and I were talking a couple of days ago, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. It seems in these realms of leadership and responsibility, the time and energy isn't available to the people in these positions to really research and dig in. As an example, I was with the former supervisor who retired when she went to the club of students of color at Redwood High and sat in that room for an hour with the students and listened to them. And she took notes. And that, in what she learned in that experience, was part of the forming of the LCAP, which for those listening is the official state of California educational diatribe, for lack of a better word, turned in.
That's not a great word.
Right. I know. I knew it when I said it.
It's their documentation on what their policy should be.
Right. And
Okay.
but my point is, she took the time to be in the room with the kids. And the first 20 minutes was just the oven was on high. And her willingness to sit there and be with all that heated energy. And then the next 40 minutes was a real dialogue, and the students were heard. And it seems like you have even brought up, I think, Dick, in one of your columns, like really the people in these places are volunteers. There's nothing given to them. They have jobs and lives they're attempting to also uphold at the same time. Do we need to change our political system where, in essence, these are paid jobs so people have the time and energy to dig in deeper?
Was the supervisor Katie Rice?
No, it was Dr. Tapier, Tara Tapier.
Oh, you mean the superintendent?
Superintendent, I apologize. Superintendent, my apologies.
Staff person. Well, she is a staff person. She is a full-time paid staff person.
But I'm talking about the board, because it seems in my experience.
When California changed its legislature from part-timers to full-timers, that was the hope. I'm not impressed by California's legislature accomplishment on the big issues of the day. I get press releases from all these guys on trivia, yet we have an unhoused population whose needs have been only peripherally addressed. We have people with severe mental and substance abuse issues. They don't have any idea on how to deal with them effectively, but they're full-timers. I'm more interested in people with backbone, curiosity, patience, and particularly a belief in transparency. It's just a bugaboo of mine. Don't hide things, because we're going to find out sooner or later. I mean, that's the answer. If you're persistent enough, that's our job, the press's job to do. I think that the search is more for people of character. A person with character is going to make sufficient time. When I was a city councilman, the joke was, it's not the word joke, but the humor was, if a citizen called, well, we certainly would say, so you live on Wildemar? What number? Are you home now? I'll be right there. And the race was that there would now be 5 people driving up Wildemar, 5 councilmen trying to get to the spot. We got paid $50 a month, but we wanted to. This was our opportunity for service, and this was our opportunity for something we wanted to do. We like doing, and so if you like doing something, you're better at it than if you don't. So I'm more interested in character and a willingness to be open, transparent, think. The person that sits on the city council says, maybe I'm wrong. That's the person that deserves the vote.
Yeah.
This brings up the opportunity to, one, remind people that when the Independent Journal calls you and you decide whether to subscribe, you're not just deciding whether to take the paper, but you're deciding whether to support one of the most important pillars in the way our democracy functions, which is the press. Number 2, people who are of the character that you're describing, Mr. Spotswood, are often the ones who don't make the effort, who don't have the time and energy. And so if you are someone of character, someone who cares, please step into the role of service, run for office in your local municipality, be the difference as opposed to rail at the difference. End of
Amen.
rant.
Amen.
I need to wrap up, and I want to respect everyone's time. I could go on. This has been so informative. I feel like, but we have one question we always traditionally end our episodes with. So but before I ask that, I'm wondering if you retain hope for the American way of life and the United States as an example of democracy and pursuit of happiness for humanity.
Do I remain optimistic?
Yes, sir. That's the question. No?
No.
Oh, dear. I'm sorry to hear that. And
what would we need to change for you
First
to?
of all, I had a very good friend of mine who says he's an optimist, and he says to me, "You're a pessimist." And I said, "Well, that's true, but you're so often disappointed, and I'm occasionally surprised." And so that's the life of a pessimist. As my wife sometimes says when I talk about broader politics, you're in one of your dark moods. And so I can go in a dark mood. It depends on the day. But I would be, optimism is not a word I would use. Hopeful, but not optimistic.
well, what
That's my answer.
differentiates hopeful from optimism?
One's a wish and one's a prognosis.
Yes, unfortunately.
All right. One's a
Right,
prayer.
Right.
It was a pleasure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I hope I was straightforward enough.
Oh, it was lovely. It was really great to talk with you. You're articulate, and your insights and your willingness to be transparent and share your historical perspective is so essential to everyone's understanding. And thank you again for your service to our community. We often thank veterans, but we need to thank our municipal and board members much more. It's not an easy job, especially when you're doing it as a second job. But to wrap up the show, we have one of the most difficult questions yet that we've asked you. And we ask it of everyone, and it may seem somewhat of a throwaway when you hear it, but it really is important to us, and we really bring our heart to it, which is why we ask every time. All right, Dick, are you ready?
Right.
Eminem or the Foo Fighters?
Eminem.
All right. How come?
Why?
I don't know.
Got it. Thank you. It's been a true pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time. And we will let you know when this goes live. And if we can do anything, or if you have other guests that you'd want to recommend from your sphere of influence, we would love to continue the conversation in this community about these various issues.
I'm right here.
All right.
Take care.
Recording stopped.